Hi friends, hope you are doing well. I'm Dr. Ganguly. Welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to talk about communication skills for scholars. And essentially these skills are very useful for you whether you are a bachelor degree student, master's degree student, and particularly if you are a PhD student or postdoc or a junior faculty or a faculty member or maybe a researcher in a science lab or in a corporate setting. So essentially you will see that in many cases it is the combination of technical skills and communication skills which leads to success. So we can say that success equals technical skills plus communication skills. So that's one equation which is probably not taught to you in most colleges and universities. So let's begin with this set of skills. So number one is communication with self. And actually this is something people do not give a lot of importance to, but the first person you need to communicate is with yourself. And how you communicate with yourself is through self-talk, which is often going on in your head, but also through the art of writing things in a diary or sometimes what people call a journal or a personal journal. Now this is very important because you need to make out plans for the next 5 years, the present year, every month and every week. So this actually lets you have a path for your life. Now there are many quotations on planning and so on. Now there was a quotation by Drucker that plans are useless but planning is very useful. So you can get the point about this, that spending time planning actually is very important. Very often or sometimes the plans which you make may not be very useful for you, but you will find that the process of planning was very useful for you because you can think about various different options which are possible in your life, and then you can think about which option you are going to take. So essentially this is basically communication with self, and it is very important and it's often not given due importance in the curriculum at large. Now many of the systems where people get into trouble is because they do not have any plan and therefore they are part of somebody else's plan. So that plan may be their supervisor plan, their parents plan, their spouse's plan, their friend's plan, and something like that. So again, to counter this kind of drifting, you need to make sure that you have a plan for your life. Now one of the simple productivity tools to use in communication is to have a task list for every week, because this will make sure that you are getting all the things done which are required to be done. So one of the things which people find when they go from high school students to people managing their life on their own is that they have to do so many activities. They have to go to the bank sometimes, they have to pay their bills, they have to get their car insurance renewed and so on. So they have to file their taxes, for example, and so all these things you need to write down somewhere. It needs to be written out in your weekly task list, and the best time to make this task list is on Sunday night. So these are ways you can communicate with yourself. So in the task list, make 2 columns. In one column, lay out all the things which you need to do as your work activity. So this is like a professional column, and the second side you lay out all the things which you need to do as your personal activity. So these may be things related to your finances, related to your health, related to your family, and so on. So this ensures that you do not neglect any one column, because in some situations people are completely obsessed with their professional life at the expense of their family and personal life and even their financial life, as the case may be. Now the second issue is communicate with your supervisor. Now this is one of the most important things which you need to do in your professional life, and very important situation as far as most scholars and researchers are concerned. And this is sometimes a problem because in many cases researchers and PhD supervisors and many scientists, being difficult people that they are, do not even set up any weekly meetings or proper channels of communication. So it may fall upon you to actually set up a weekly meeting with your supervisor, and sometime he or she may not even want to set up a weekly meeting, in which case you can come to meet them every week at some time when they seem to be free. So that is something which is very important, because in many cases research has various up and down moments, and you need to talk to your advisor or supervisor to figure out what to do in those situations. So whenever you are in some crossroad situation, you can go to the left or you can go to the right. You need to talk to your supervisor about the decision you need to make. Now whenever you are talking to people, take with yourself some graphs, some slide to talk to them, because that's always very easy. If you show some graph to people, they immediately get excited. You show some variation of x versus y, and then suddenly the supervisor will be very interested in figuring out the interesting result you have obtained. Now one more way to communicate with your supervisor is by writing abstracts, and essentially this is a process which is often useful. If you are taking part in a conference, you can write the abstract even without thinking of a conference, because you can just write an abstract of a typical journal paper which is going to come up. Now any kind of proposal is also very useful. So whether you are writing a PhD proposal or whether you are writing a proposal for some funding body, all these proposals are very useful few page documents which essentially communicate the essence of your activity to your supervisor. So in many cases actually PowerPoint slides are okay, but written matter of 1 or 2 pages is probably a better substitute in many cases. So keep that in mind. Even when you are thinking about writing a journal paper, you could write a title, you could write the skeleton of the paper, you could write the abstract, the formulation, the results and discussion, conclusion section, and in the formulation section, the results and discussion section, you can write out the different subheadings and subtitles. So again, you can discuss these things even before you start writing a paper. So it is always a good idea to get these things sorted out with your supervisor. Now the third issue is communication with lab mates and lab colleagues. Now this is very important because you are going to learn many things together rather than by working alone. So there are actually very few people who have learned a lot of software packages such as LaTeX or MATLAB just by reading the manual. So most of the time it's a combination of asking your lab mates, looking in Google, and then figuring out by typing certain commands and certain examples from certain tutorial content on YouTube that what you need to do. So essentially nowadays learning is done more through this kind of random process rather than through a process of reading a manual provided by the software developer. So in most cases this is true, and a lot of the information you will get from lab mates. So if you are stuck in any problem, your code has some bugs, you will find that your lab colleagues will have a very simple solution in many cases. Maybe you need to change your function, maybe the function you are using for a problem doesn't work in a certain system, and so on. And some more things to keep in mind when mixing with lab mates is that don't congregate only with people of your own ethnic group or your own religious group. Try to mix with all the different people, because diversity teaches you a lot. Diversity teaches you to interact with different people, and this is something which is good training for you in your life in general, because in most cases if you work in research or scholarship or most tech companies, you are going to deal with a lot of diverse people. And certainly try to always talk in the English language, because that's certainly going to improve your language skills. Now the fourth issue is what not to talk about. So essentially this is something about communication which people often don't discuss, and that is the importance of silence. So there are many topics which are very controversial. For example, whenever you begin to talk about politics or religion or habits related to food, whether it's good to be vegetarian or non-vegetarian, or what type of meat is appropriate or not, or also you talk about any issues such as salary or your grades or gender issues and preferences, you are going to land into a minefield of complexity, because what has happened is that many of these issues are very divisive and people can have only one way of looking at it because it hits them very strongly in a personal sense. So if somebody is of a very strong religious bent of mind, then they will look at the religious texts to guide them, and then those religious texts are pretty harsh in their judgment of many of these scenarios. If somebody is extremely liberal in their thinking, then they of course think that many of these things are permitted, because as far as human beings are concerned, they have complete freedom of choice. So unfortunately, many a friendship has been ruined by discussion of many of these issues. So try to avoid discussion of all these taboo subjects which I mentioned before in official settings, and generally try to discuss your work, your research, or more benign subjects such as the weather, as the case may be, or different aspects of the city, places you can go to, tourism, aspects about people's culture, and so on. So again, this is something which is very important, and people don't often tell you that. That is the importance of not talking, or the importance of the sounds of silence. Now the fifth point is go to conferences, and I have mentioned this many times, is that some people think that just publishing journal papers or writing reports within companies or making PowerPoint presentations is enough, but actually going to various technical and scholarly conferences at least once a year is going to greatly help you to network, to learn some of the latest things which are going on in the field, and also to write a paper every now and then in these conferences, so you make sure that you are visible to the community and you have something to show the people for the accomplishment you have done in the year. Because like I have mentioned several times before, conference papers get written, journal papers get planned. So you may plan a journal paper, but it may take you time to write it. You have to show it to your supervisor will return it to you with a lot of red ink. You will give it back to him or her, and this process may continue for a very long time. Your supervisor may never be happy with your current state of the paper, and I know of people who have spent 3-4 years writing a paper before they could submit one to journal. So essentially, if you write a conference paper, there is a limited amount of time, there is a deadline. So if your abstract gets into the conference, then certainly your conference paper is quite likely to get in, and therefore what happens is that at the end of the year you are going to actually have a bullet point which you can put in your resume or CV, and also this can help you in your promotion or even renewal of contract in many cases. So remember that conference papers are important. They do help you build your communication skill. It forces you to make a presentation in front of a group and defend your work, and that skill is often very important, because when you write a journal paper, people really do not know whether you have written a paper or your supervisor has written the paper, and so the fact that you are presenting a certain paper before a group of people is always given a lot of importance by the community of researchers and scholars, and they will remember you for it, and they will help you later, and they will all become part of your network, and they may even write letters for you. So this was my take on some of the communication skills which are important for a researcher. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in a video sometime soon. See you then.